happy to have my good friend John Katzman with us on Ed on the Edge. For those who've been listening from the beginning, you can recall John was actually our second guest, and through popular demand, we've got you back today. So thank you for taking time.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike.
John, you're one of the great entrepreneurs in the ed tech space, with that, and you've been a friend, a fan for a long time. But you're doing something really important next week in Washington D.C. Why you tell us what it's about and why you're doing it?
Thanks. We're running a conference with the Huron Group in D.C. at Georgetown's Capitol campus, and the idea is, last year we did a conference on post-OPM. What does the world look like? And I think I have an answer. And so this year's conference is about university networks. That in an analog, slow-moving world, you can float on your own bottom. But in a fast-changing digital world, networks win. And so what do networks look like in higher ed? How do they work? How are they different from associations or from like state systems? And what are the implications on policy and on cost and marketing? And it should be a lot of fun.
And give me the dates.
It's March 5 to 7. We start at 5 o'clock on the 5th, and we go through lunch on the 7th.
So when you talk about networks, and I don't know if you've read the book Nexus by Yuval Harari.
Yep.
And that's what his whole thesis of what these new networks look like in the age of AI. What are some of the key fundamentals that you think are there, and how that's changed from the traditional way that education, particularly post-secondary education, was delivered?
Well, if you look at historically, when there's any sort of networking, it's with schools that are geographically close. The liberal arts schools in Philadelphia, the schools in Western Massachusetts, they're kind of consortia. And they, on the one hand, can be your friend, and we can allow students to take classes at any campus. But on the other hand, they're competitors, and they're little. On the other hand, you look at associations like ACE, and they're kind of kumbaya. We're all there together. It's as if you had Facebook, but everybody was your friend and everybody else was their friend. That's kind of cool in some ways, but it's really limiting in others. There are things I want to tell my friends that I don't want to tell other people. So a network allows me to work with the people I want to work with on this particular initiative and not work with the people I don't. And then you've got state systems, and they're very top down. And the network, the whole beauty of it is that it's opt-in, that I can leave the network or I can disconnect from you on the network at any time. And again, it allows me to choose who I work with and yet have the benefits of scale and of network effects.
Yeah. So talk about, you obviously were the founder of 2U, which was one of the original OPMs with a unique model. What do you think has happened with the OPM value proposition that requires a new way of thinking?
I was surprised, and James Quall will be speaking at this event. And I thought before he left office, he would finally put a bullet in the whole OPM model. But it's been struggling with or without legislative change or regulatory change. The idea was a simple one. Traditional schools and universities weren't thriving online. They didn't have the tools. They didn't have the expertise. They didn't understand the idea. Well, they didn't understand adult learners, but they didn't understand the idea of everything happening kind of in real time. Somebody expresses an interest in an online program, they expect to enroll in the next month or two and start. The OPMs were there to help them figure that stuff out. But where the model took a left turn is they didn't change, especially post-COVID, but even before that, as schools developed some expertise, the risk profile changed. I no longer need to have crazy economic returns on a program because my risk is a lot lower. It's not a venture anymore. And two, the costs are lower, and the OPM stuck with, fairly high revenue share. And third, they had kind of long-term static contracts that kept schools from building their own capacity, and all of that we looked at and said, well, we could do better than that. But the world continued to change. Like every other part of the world has moved away from online and on ground and really moved towards what I call agility. Home Depot doesn't care where you buy the hammer or if they deliver it or if you pick it up. It's all, you're just a customer.
You're just looking for a hammer.
You're just looking for a hammer. And they're going to deliver you a hammer one way or the other. And schools, even the ones with a flex model now, you can work online or you can work on ground. It misses the point. Most online students live within bicycle distance of campus. They would love to come to campus for some stuff, and they'd love to be home for other stuff. Apple, when they started, and you've heard me talk about this before, when they started the Apple stores, we all thought they were showrooms. They're the highest grossing stores per square foot in the country by a lot. And it's because they really understand what you want to do when you're online and why you're in that store. And so you need this new generation of vendors, of partners for schools to say, how do we use your campus? How do we use the internet? How do we create an experience that's really great for the guy who needs a hammer?
So you use the analogy of Apple, and I'm going a little bit off track, but I just think it's interesting as you kind of think of different models and why they work and how they can fit kind of the world that we're in and where we're going. I think the secret to the Apple store was the Genius Bar, because you had a physical place that people could go into and basically get help. A lot of the stuff you're doing online and you're doing it, at your home or wherever it's convenient, but you go in that Genius Bar close to your house. They could help you use your stuff or know something you couldn't really figure out as well online. You could do it with people around you too, which again made that experience. I think it was really the part of the genius of the Apple store was the Genius Bar.
I couldn't agree more, but it really is the sum of the parts, right? You've got the Genius Bar, you've got kind of the community that you talked about. I can try out products and get a feeling for them that I couldn't really do online. I can leave something off that has to be physically fixed. Like there's a lot going on there besides being a showroom. And you think about a college campus, there are these beautiful places that people would love to be there and that are anchors of a community. But they say, look, if you're an online student, you're not here. Like you can't use the gym. Like you're an online student. It's like, to hell with that. Like I want to be there for cocktail parties. I want to be there for the football game. I want to be there for a guest lecturer who's coming in and who I always, thought was terrific. I want to use that campus when I want to use that campus. But that doesn't mean you have to drag me in there to come to a class that I could have been doing asynchronously plus synchronously, but probably better than sitting in some lecture hall.
As you think about the future of higher education, we talk about a network model and network effects, and I think that's really incredibly important to understand. Who can we look at today that is starting to show kind of some of the features of that?
I'll tell you, you have to look outside of higher ed because you've got models like, Michael Crow is amazing and he's your partner at ASU, but he's not a peer of anybody, right? Yeah. He's, so working with him, you're, with ASU and friends. So that's a model that he sort of gets that there might be joint things, but it's not quite what I'm looking for. And then again, you've got the state systems and others. When you go outside of education, though, and you say, well, what's a good network? And then you try to apply it back. Here's the kind of thing that I mean. I have built simulations for business programs where one simulation for, one part of one course was $250,000 to build. And I would say to them, hey, why don't we get like 4 other schools around the country, none of whom compete with one another, none of whom are on your overlap list. And why don't we just share the cost of this 5 ways? And now it's $50,000 and you can all have 5 of them, right? We can do lots of stuff. And they're like, no, I don't want to share it with anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. This is my thing. So you've got the notion that we can collaborate, not with everybody, not like publishing it for anybody to use like a case study, but just for the people who you don't compete with. Or online marketers know that if you're aggressive and you're really looking to fill a class online, you're only going to pull about 2% of your prospects to enroll, right? They're looking at other things. You're not admitting everybody. There's all kinds of reasons that a 2% yield is, perfectly acceptable. But imagine, what do you do with the 98? What do you do for the kids who don't enroll? How do you work with other schools to say, look, if we're the wrong fit, they might be the right fit? How do you let go a little bit, lighten up on the back? Because if you can turn one of those 98 students into an enroll someplace, we can cut everybody's marketing costs by a third, right? There are all kinds of ways of working together, and it might not be working with the guy down the street, working with a direct competitor, but collaboration done right at scale can really lower the cost of higher ed and can improve it.
And I think we're at this, obvious inflection point with higher ed. I think you kind of famously predicted, I think it was probably about 10 years ago, that you said that half or a third of the higher, college universities were going to go away in the next 5 years. It didn't, you're a little bit early in that prediction, but now we're seeing this wave of universities closing. And part of that is because this model of basically being able to raise your tuition at 2.5, 3x inflation, those days are gone. And if you don't have a big endowment, so now you're into a different world. So back to like having to rethink your model, because I think the pricing model is not sustainable. Right?
The pricing model is a disaster, but even your comment, and you've heard me say this before, the net tuition in higher ed has been flat to inflation for 20 odd years. They haven't been actually raising their prices at all. What schools have been doing is jacking up the sticker price and then discounting heavily. In other words, they look a lot like airlines. Everybody's paying a different price for the seat. The difference is airlines talk about their least expensive seat and universities advertise their most expensive seat, which is kind of crazy. How we get schools to be smarter about how they describe their price is something we're working on. At the same time, think about how hateful the financial aid process is, how long it takes, how opaque it is, how it hits you emotionally. Did I save enough money for my kids to go to college? I mean, there's a lot packed in there and none of it's good. There are schools, I won't name them unless you ask me, where their average kid who gets aid walks out with $25,000 of debt, which is not terrible, right? That's not unusual. What's unusual is they work so hard to figure out who should get that money, who should get aid, grants or loans or whatever. Of that 25,000, 5,000 is the cost of figuring out how much aid to give, is the financial aid department. Not points, not interest, just, we live in a world where that should be free and instant. So it would be way better for the parents, way better for the kids, and by the way, cut the amount of debt of their students by 20%.
What do you think, as it relates to the return on investment, needs to look like for a student? Because, even as you see different models emerge and maybe costs come down or other ways to accumulate credits that you can apply towards a degree or apply towards opportunity, what do you think the measurement of success for universities should look like? And who's doing a good job at that today?
Where the department tried to go when there was a department was, let's measure this. Let's measure the net tuition people are paying versus the return in terms of their income 1 year out, 5 years out, 10, 20 years out. And I think that's a good exercise. Making that more transparent to students, more approachable for students, I think would be a good thing. But overall, I think if higher ed as a group, number one, marketed themselves more effectively, the return on investment of higher ed overall is still really good and growing. The gap is enormous. And we can all say, boy, we should be better at prepping you for your first job. But a lot of schools will say, I'm prepping you for your fifth job. And we're, by all accounts, doing a pretty good job of that. But how they describe themselves, how they price, and how they collaborate, there's just so many things schools do that we could save so much money through collaborating. You can either get there by being enormous, by being an ASU, by being a Southern New Hampshire, or you can get there by working together in a network. And that's the thing. Like, networks win because they have all the benefits of a large company without forcing a kind of one-size-fits-all approach.
So you had an idea back in the early days of 2U of effectively creating a consortium, right, that you could participate in. Was that idea? I mean, was it too new? Were the universities not feeling the pain enough? Or was it just too expensive to implement?
I left right at the beginning of that project, and I think it was just a failure of execution. The idea of study abroad, the idea of the semester online, we can be more flexible. And the way networks work, there's not this great happy moment where everybody gets it. It's, I think I can save you 10% of your marketing spend by doing this and this, and why don't we test it to see if it has the kind of impact I'm talking about. Or I think I can save you a couple points on your learning design and give you better materials, still differentiate you, but with less cost and hassle. Or I think I can help your students do co-op programs without being Northeastern. There are a bunch of schools that would love to do what Northeastern does, but Northeastern's really good at it. They've done it a long time. There are like 40 people there working on it. You're a smaller school and you don't right now have a co-op program. How do you implement it? Well, you got to work with other schools. It can't be, you're not going to stand on your own. Just what everybody outside of higher ed discovered is networks really do work.
So let's go back to the conference you're having next week in Washington, D.C. What other people are going to be there? And what are some of the things you're most excited about to be focused on?
We have a policy thread running through this because obviously everything going on right now in this administration has enormous impact on universities. And so we have James Qual, the former undersecretary. We have a request in a conversation with the incoming undersecretary, but he's not confirmed yet, and that might not be possible. But looking for people from the administration and from the organizations working with them to have a conversation about the different approaches and where things are likely to go legislatively and from a regulatory point of view. We have and Ted Mitchell is part of that, and again another former undersecretary, but someone who's a keen observer of what's going on and participant in DC. And then we've got a bunch of press who are looking at higher ed from a range of different lenses to try to make sense of lots of different pieces. How do they fit together into a pattern? You're hopefully going to be there, and but folks from inside higher ed, Chronicle of Higher Ed. So I need that thread.
You told me I was on a panel. I better be there, right?
You are on a panel. I'm so glad you said that. And then you've got people from the tech world, because I think there's no industry that thinks about networks better than the tech industry, AI and other facets of companies and who are thoughtful about where is my place in this network? What do I do uniquely well? And how do I rely on other people to do the other things? Like how do we give the best thing to our customers we can at the lowest possible cost? And the technology world's been driving that for a long time. So we're trying to put, and then a bunch of people from higher ed who are doing really thoughtful work. But trying to graft what works in other industries into higher ed against the backdrop of changing legislation.
And talk about AI and how you think of AI as being both, something that you need to fear, but also something that you need to embrace, and how that affects the networks that you're talking about.
Yeah, we're going to be announcing some new initiatives. And one of them, we built a course for the Institute for Citizens and Scholars, and they work with now 120 top universities who are trying to figure out how do we have respectful free speech and an interchange of ideas on campus, right? How do we foster that kind of environment? Because it's trickier than it looks. And the piece we built is a 1-hour course for incoming freshmen on why to have hard conversations and how to have them successfully. And the way the course is structured, each module, there's like a very short video, like a minute, followed by a debate between you and a bot. And the bot represents some student on campus, like, and they could be more informed on this issue or less informed. They could be more polite or more rude, but it's a really good back and forth, followed by a coaching session with a coach bot saying, here's what I liked about what you did. When you used your voice that way, when you said this, when you moved your shoulders this way, like, how do you build trust and how do you hear the other person and have them hear you, and drive towards, a learning. And we think that course is right at the cutting edge of the use of AI in the classroom, right? It is, you couldn't do this 2 years ago, right? Just have an easy audio video conversation with a bot that felt authentic, right? And right at the beginning of the session, you tell us, what are the issues you care about? What side do you take on them? You're pro-life, you're pro-choice, you're, Gaza or Israel or whatever the topic is. And then the bot just takes the other side of the position and we have at it.
Kind of like you and me, but with a bot.
It's exactly like that, because we each just pick up on whatever the person's saying and instinctively disagree. It's exactly right. So in the classroom, I think we're just at the front edge of AI being used to really change learning. And, I see some startups that are like, we can use AI to build a textbook more cheaply. And that's a terrible idea. But I see others who say, I can have a textbook for each kid. Like, I can create from a base material something that really meets you where you are. I know what the class just did. I know what you need to know by next Wednesday. And let me just teach you that, in the smartest possible way. And that is fascinating. So I can see the use of AI in the classroom is going to be fabulous. It's outside the classroom, though, that it can help us lower costs. It's taking things that right now are manual and hit or miss and expensive, and making them self-serve and quick and easy. Like picking courses, like the amount of money schools spend on advisement. If those advisors were using AI really effectively, we could lower that cost. We could make them able to help more kids and help them better and help kids really understand, what switching majors is going to cost you $20,000. Are you sure? Like, here's another option. Finish it up and get a master's for the same price.
So, you're a fabulous entrepreneur. You're the founder of Princeton Review. You're the founder of 2U. You're the founder of Noodle and all the different pieces of the Noodle empire. But if you were a 25-year-old entrepreneur today and you were looking at the education space, is there an area that you would want to focus on that you think has the greatest potential?
Everybody tends to run towards a few things, and it changes with what's hot. But right now, there's a lot of entrepreneurial energy around school to work and helping kids find the right career, the right job. There's energy around college admissions and counseling stuff. And those are terrible ideas. Actually, I've just watched so much money get burned, and it would probably be more fun to just set a match to a couple $1 million than some of the things I've seen. On the other hand, it's the more subtle stuff. It's saying, what can we do to actually help universities dramatically lower the cost of administering financial aid, dramatically lower the cost of advisement on campus, and make those things work more effectively. Help them evaluate transfer students and help transfer students say, oh, if I go to this school, here's how many of my credits are going to be taken, and here's how much college is going to cost me. Like, really understand the impact. The tougher things are more subtle, and there's a lot of politics around all of them, right? Like, nobody becomes a college president because they want to be remembered for cutting the cost of administration by 20%. And yet, it's critically important they do that. And there's businesses to be had there. So I think the key in higher ed is immerse in it enough. The key to K-12, immerse in it enough that you really know where the pain points are, because they're not the immediate places people are looking. The problem with the career stuff tends to be, we all agree kids should be better counseled about where they should work and what their career should be, but no one will pay for it. Parents are tapped out. Kids, they're just looking for a job. employers aren't thinking long-term. They're just looking for an entry-level employee. So we all need it, but no one's paying for it. So the question as an entrepreneur is what needs to get done that somebody's actually willing to pay for? How much money is being spent now, and how can I improve that process?
As you think about the kind of reality of lifelong learning and how much careers are going to change, how much what you need to know as a learned person. What if you were starting a university, in addition to kind of being part of a network model, what are some of the other key things you'd be thinking about having in your arsenal to attract constituency?
Another thing we're doing that we'll make some announcements on at this conference is I've been thinking a lot about lifelong learning and why universities collectively have like a 1% market share. Like why basically this country, we spend $100 billion a year on lifelong learning, professional stuff. I'm not talking about vocational ed and higher ed as a under $1 billion, like a little tiny piece of it. And you look category by category, continuing legal education, continuing medical, professional development for teachers, and higher ed's not in the game. It's only by working together intelligently that higher ed can grab a 20% market share there. There's opportunities there so much larger than the birth dearth or any of the problems we're talking about, but how we go after it has to be nuanced. And we've now signed up 8, and we have another 30 conversations going. And I think by school year, we might have, 25 great universities working in a network, not in a big platform that has everything, in some really, really thoughtful ways. And we're still like adding partners, both higher ed and people in the private sector. But you're totally right. It's a tremendous place that higher ed should be. It's a big space. The expertise sits on college campuses. People feel good about the schools that they went to. And the people doing it are all alums, right? It's not alternative learning, it's extended learning. Why are we not in this movie?
Exactly. Well, and you think about, go back to the Apple analogy, you buy an Apple and you have a great experience, and to help you with all this stuff. Now I'm going to go to, buy a Dell or something. No, you want to keep on going back and have a lifelong relationship as long as they're helping you with the stuff that you're looking for, right?
As long as they're in the game, they're my choice.
So here we're going to do the lightning round. So 1 sentence to 3 sentences, no more than 3 sentences, just reaction to different people, place, and things. Okay. We'll start off with Mark Chernis.
Incredible guy. Very, very strong operator. Bullshit free.
Richard Sarnoff.
Richard was, in some sense, born at 30,000 feet. And there are a bunch of people like that who are lightweights and who are utterly not empathetic. Richard is so thoughtful, so hardworking, and yet so calm. He's just such a great person because I'm sorry, that's more than 3 sentences.
Rob Cohen.
Highest signal to noise ratio of anybody I've ever met. Like super smart and ego free. Matt Patinsky would be in the same category. Just people who all signal, no noise.
Your favorite online course?
The one I just built for citizens and scholars. It is incredible.
Best podcast, favorite podcast?
One I'm on right now.
Right, that's the right answer. That's why you'll be back next week as well. Most influential book that you had?
I generally love fiction, but I just read The Splendid and the Vile about Winston Churchill by Eric Larson, who wrote Devil in the White City and a bunch of other stuff. He writes nonfiction like it was fiction, and you can't believe this stuff is true, but it's true, and it's such a good read, and Churchill was such a great man.
Favorite sports team?
The New York Jets. It's hard to be us.
Favorite bar to have a beer with a friend in New York?
I'm less a beer guy and more a margarita guy. So depending on what part of town you're in, you need a really good margarita. You should ping me and I'll tell you.
Go to karaoke song.
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Your favorite place to work out?
My office is here at Chelsea Piers. The gym here, if your gym is a church, this is St. Peter's. It's like over 100,000 feet and has every toy and is just totally fabulous.
John Katzman, it is always a pleasure to visit with you. I'll see you next week in Washington, D.C. for your event. For everybody who wants to go to that, give them one more time the details.
It's universitynetworksummit.com, and or just ping me. And I can't wait to see you there, Mike. And thank you.
Thank you.